Today I'm going to be showing you guys how I made this black heart geode cake. It's pretty easy even if you're a beginner. I show you step by step, so as long as you follow the steps, it should turn out something like this. We're going to start by lining our heart pans with some parchment paper, so just take your pans and trace them on a piece of parchment paper. And then we're going to cut the heart shapes out and then spray our pans with some non-stick cooking spray very well. Get into all the corners so the cake doesn't stick. And then we're just going to place those heart-shaped parchment paper pieces into the pan and then set those aside. Now I'm making this chocolate cake recipe from Sugar Geek Show. It's not my favorite chocolate cake recipe, but it does have like a pretty good flavor. I'm going to put all the ingredients and measurements in the description box below. Again, it's pretty simple. You just want to sift your dry ingredients here. I'm taking my butter and sugar and mixing it until it's light and fluffy. And when you make anything, you want to make sure that you scrape down the sides of the bowl just to make sure that everything's getting mixed together evenly. Again, all the instructions and measurements will be down below. The recipe is pretty good. It's not my favorite again, but it actually is really good. I love the flavor and the addition of the beer and the mayo. That's really delicious. But in terms of texture, I like a little more moist for me personally. I think the bonus with this recipe is that the chocolate flavor is so deep and rich. But I like a more moist cake. So we're at the final step again. When you're baking anything, you want to make sure to scrape down the sides pretty often. And there's our cake batter. Now I'm just using a scale to divide the batter evenly between the pans. You can use a measuring cup, but I didn't want to dirty another dish. So I'm using a scale to make sure they're even, and I'm flattening the top and then baking them at 350, I think, until a toothpick comes out clean. Now I'm wrapping the cakes in plastic wrap as soon as they come out of the oven and placing them in the freezer. Once the cakes are completely cold, we're going to start assembling. So I just took a little bit of ganache and put it on the cake board to make sure that the cakes stick to the board and doesn't move around. Now I'm just using a piping bag. You don't need to use one, but it helps me to get the layer of frosting even on the cake. And I'm just doing an even layer of ganache on the first layer of cake and then spreading that out. And just a heads up, I only used 2 of the 3 cake layers that we baked because the third would have made it too tall for what I was going for. You can use 3, but I wanted a kind of shorter cake. So I piped a ring of ganache to hold in this German chocolate filling that I'm adding here. And then I'm smoothing a little bit more ganache on top so the top layer of cake sticks. And now with some more ganache in a piping bag, I'm just filling in all the gaps that I can see. And I'm just adding some extra frosting. And then now I'm going to give the whole cake a crumb coat. Because the cake is really soft, the frosting job is going to look very rough and it's not going to be smooth. But you can see I'm just adding on frosting to make sure that the whole cake is covered. And then I'm using a bench scraper to smooth out the sides of the cake. It's not going to be perfect, but you just want it to be as smooth as possible. And then I placed the cake in the freezer for about 40 minutes to let the first layer harden up. And then when it comes out, I take the bench scraper again, run it under hot water, dry it off, and then use it to smooth out the cake one last time. After that, I put the cake in the fridge for another 20-30 minutes, and now I'm cutting off the top edge so it's nice and sharp. If you guys want a full tutorial on crumb coating and stacking, let me know and I'll have that for you ASAP. I forgot to film this part, but I just took a knife and I did like this shape, I don't know what to call it, all around the cake, and I gradually went towards the bottom of the cake. So I started at the top and then I gradually worked my way to the bottom. And I just scored it the first time. And now for the second time, I'm gonna actually take my knife and go in deeper to cut out pieces of the cake. And you don't want to cut out too big of a chunk of cake because then your cake is gonna like collapse and it's gonna fall apart. So you just maybe want to cut in like less than 1/2 inch into the cake and then start taking chunks out like you see here. And right now the cake is completely like solid. It's not frozen, but it's solid, and that's gonna help you a lot if you're a beginner, is to work with a sturdy cake. Now for our geodes, I'm just using rock candy I bought from the store, and I'm just breaking them up into little pieces. And now what I'm doing is I'm working with like 2 inches at a time. I'm spreading on some more ganache, and again, don't spread it along the whole gap that we cut off because then the cake is really cold and it's going to set the frosting up and the rock candy is not going to stick. So just frost a little section at a time and then add some more rocks and then do that until your cake looks like this. Some edible silver leaf, and I'm just going to add this along the edge of the rock geode that we cut out, just along the edge, and we're almost done. And now you should have something that looks like this. Now I'm using some more ganache to just pipe a border at the top and bottom. As you can see, there's some like frosting designs at the top. I was gonna go for like that vintage cake look, but I didn't have enough frosting, so I'm just doing the border at the top and bottom. And this is the finished cake. It's very simple, very easy. It's a very impressive design, but it's not super difficult to make.